You may have walked right by them in a crowd, bearded men in tunics who look pious and a little strange. Look closely, because some parents believe they are scriptural robots assigned to target and capture your college-age children. Here at Berkeley, they stand on street corners and strike up conversations at random. To the spiritual kids, they quote from the Bible and promise a life of certainty. The lonely kids, they offer support. At Columbia University, they lure students with a provocative question: do right and wrong exist? They offer a place among God's chosen with such intensity that in days, sometimes hours, students drop out and disappear. The enigmatic founder, Jim Roberts, whom they call the Elder. These are the last published photographs of him in 1975. The parents believe he's a bizarre, unstable religious fanatic who steals the minds of promising kids, some from the best universities in the country, Harvard, Brown, Northwestern, leaving their anguished mothers and fathers desperate to find them.
That day in particular, I remember my room was in disarray. I had some breakfast, and I just got a few changes of clothes, grabbed some harmonicas, threw that in my backpack, wrote a quick note to my parents, just went out on the road. Dear family, don't worry about me. I've gone with the missionaries, the bearded ones, remember? To serve the Lord. This is what I want to do with my life. Don't fill out a missing persons report or anything like that. I will be fine. The Lord comes first. Daniel.
The day my son Daniel left, I read the note and couldn't believe what I was reading, and then found him about 2 blocks from the house waiting for a bus. I stopped and picked him up. I told him I'd give him a ride, but first I wanted him to talk to his mother.
The idea of being separated from him was real hurtful, so I was crying. And to begin with, we didn't know what we were dealing with, the magnitude of this group. We didn't know their name. But we were fearful. Mm-hmm. We knew there was something wrong.
When you hear that your son is eating garbage, it hits you like a brick wall. What's happening to my son? How can somebody go from what he was doing to eating garbage? Seemed to be doing okay. What happened to him? Did his mind go? Did he lose it completely?
Being in the fellowship, I first went to Colorado, then I went to San Francisco, down to Half Moon Bay, down to Santa Cruz, up to Arcata, down to LA, through Santa Monica, got a bus to Tucson, went there to New Orleans. From there, went up to Champaign-Urbana in Illinois, then to Chicago for a bit. From Chicago, went to St. Louis, was there for quite a while. Then went on another road trip to Fort Collins, Colorado.
Does it mean their parents did something wrong?
No, I say more often than not, it means their parents did something right. Their parents let these kids be open-minded.
There is a place in the Bible where Jesus said that a man's enemies will arise out of his own family. But Jim Roberts turned that around and presented a case that everyone in your family is your enemy. And
these former brethren, all devout Christians, were members of a group ranging from 14 months to 15 years. They say Roberts promised a truly spiritual life, but ruled with the weapon of fear.
But families? The Bible is full of families.
You had no choice because it was a package deal. If you communicated with your family, you were put out of the group. In his mind, he was sending them to hell because, that was what it meant to leave the group in his mind.
They told us submission to Roberts and his brethren began with isolation and a gradual loss of identity. They changed their names to Hebrew, spent 6 and 7 hours a day studying the Bible.
Every day we check the mailbox.
Is there anything from Daniel? Not only were we tied to the house, we stayed away from family functions after a while, almost completely. We may have attended funerals, that's about it. But
Probably. It's here. You know, we're just, I guess you could say we're grasping at straws, anything. Several months went by and I started to meet all these parents throughout the country. And in our conversation, it became clear that we should all get together.
And these are just loose pictures of kids. We don't know who they are for sure.
Okay. Those are good. We're on a high in the sky for our photography.
We encouraged each other to go on trips and try to gather as much information as we could and share it with one another.
That's Lazarus there. Yeah. Where was this?
That was in Santa Barbara.
That's the same.
That's my son. It was taken in New Orleans. They were taken they were taken the same day. That's your son. Yeah, that's the same. Stuff found the house.
Some agnostic, some Christian, some Jewish, coming together with a common goal, find their kids. How do I proceed with this situation? What do I do spiritually? How am I supposed to be handling this? Should I do nothing and wait for the whole thing to process itself and he'll come out on his own? The older parents that I was starting to meet, their attitude was the sooner you get them out, the better. And so, you know, they wanted me to get them out, but how?
there's a number of different doctrines that the Jim Roberts cult relies on to keep their members within their church. And it was important to understand each and every of those doctrines in order to be able to respond to them. Was I going to not even bother learning what the group was teaching or what the Bible said? No, I wasn't.
We had this panic. There's a sense of panic in our hearts, right, that whole time, because we were like desperately looking for Daniel.
What advice would you give to parents terrified that their child will wander into this? Silence.
It's hard to know how to protect your children when their good intentions are what make them vulnerable.
We were already 2 years later into Daniel being into the group, and we didn't have any hope in the immediate future. The Wilcox's boy had been in 5 years at that point, so we were going on 2 years, and we didn't see anything that was going to result from us not doing anything.
A lot of parents were fearful of encountering their children, going and looking and finding them, and then what? They didn't want to encounter them because they were fearful that that would make it worse.
They paralyze you into a fear of doing nothing.
But our perspective was, well, how can it be worse? You know, you have no communication now.
And so we agreed Daniel needed rescuing.
We received word from another parent that brothers were in St. Louis, Missouri.
We took the flight, rented a car,
A
and
van.
drove up to the house where they were at. Kathy's supposed to be the lookout, looking back to see if they go behind us, and I'm supposed to watch an alley end in front.
I must have dozed off.
And she must have dozed off, and I saw Daniel in the mirror. We get out of the car, and Daniel and another individual drive around on their bicycles and stop, and they're very surprised to see us there. And then an older member of the cult came up. He became very abusive and started telling Daniel to flee.
And not to listen to us.
Not to listen
And
to
we're
us.
telling him, look, we're just having a conversation with our son. You know, this has nothing to do with you. This is between us and our son. And Santini told him, flee, brother, flee.
And Daniel took off. He got to about a quarter of a block down, and I ran after him, and I got him by the shirt, and I pulled him back like this.
We're kind of wrestling with that brother's pulling Daniel away, and we're trying to pull him toward us. And
Well, he started praying in tongues. Kathy started praying in tongues, and it seemed like all hell
broke loose.
And Eli are trying to push Daniel into the van.
And I have Daniel, I'm underneath Daniel, pulling him into the van.
She falls in the van.
I fall in the van with Daniel on top of me.
Me on top of Daniel.
I didn't feel a thing.
And so we're all bunched up in there, and Daniel finally sits down. And then the brother comes back in, and we're all in the van, and I put my foot up like that, and I was ready to kick him in the face if he made another move, and he finally backed off. And I closed the door.
I got in the driver's seat
Took off.
and we're just like peeling out in the alleyway. And we knew where the interstate was. So we got on the interstate and headed home. We started talking to him, but he wouldn't, after a while he wouldn't listen. So he shut down completely.
He just wouldn't respond at all. He had his eyes closed and he was starting to plug up his ears because I was starting to read scriptures.
Share the things that we learned about the group.
At Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had to get gas, but Daniel opened the door and took off. And he ran up to a police officer who was in the middle of the intersection.
It's like 2 a.m. We're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, coming from St. Louis
And told him,
in a rented van.
these people have kidnapped me.
I was hysterical. I was in the middle of the street, pleading with the police officers to not force us to let him go. I said, please, are you a Christian? I was trying to explain to him what this cult is about. And he says, he just didn't want to make an emotional connection with me. And he says, please, you don't know, you can't let him go. Please let us take him. And he says, no, you go your way. And he told Daniel to go his way. We were like devastated and shocked. And so we said, what should we do? And Narciso says, let's go get him. And we went and found him. He was walking away. He was really angry. And so you pulled up and said, Daniel, get in the car and we'll take you wherever you want to go. And he said, he didn't believe us, didn't trust us. And Narciso says, no, I will. I'll take you. I can't leave you in this strange city. You're my son. And Daniel said, well, I want to go back to St. Louis. And Narciso told him, well, we'll take you back to St. Louis. And Daniel said, do you promise? He said, yes. And he says, okay, I have not fought you guys, but if you turn around and go toward New Mexico, he says, I will fight you. So we were totally defeated again.
We told him as much as we could about everything we had learned about the
Jim
group
Roberts.
being a cult. What it consists of is that it's a salvation by works cult.
The Bible says, for by grace you are saved through faith. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Christ came to save us, and it's through his blood. And these guys, they just add all of these heavy burdens that no man can bear. Trying to be saved, trying to live the law perfectly, and there's no way to do it. We told him, you're following another gospel, another Jesus, and that's serious, Daniel. You're going to have to stand before God one day and answer to him. If you're recruiting, if you're bringing people into this cult, you're going to have to answer to God for that.
We took him right back to the spot where we had put him into the minivan, and we hugged him and cried and told him goodbye.
I'd been expressing some of my doubts about the teachings of the fellowship to another brother. Jim Roberts sent down through his chain of command a rebuke to me. If I keep on doubting like this and voicing these opinions, I better watch out. This was sort of like the tip of the iceberg. And it was enough for them to push me out of the fellowship. And it was a very insidious way they did it too, because they didn't actually say you're kicked out. They phrased it in a way where it wouldn't seem like I could accuse them of anything, which was, we're going on the road, but you're not really welcome to come with us at this point. I was cut off from all of them. It wasn't something I was prepared for at all. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. The emotional intimacy that we shared from just a common bond and a commonality in a sea of just worldliness where we just had each other was incredible. To get rejected from that, it was like your family or people you grow to love all of a sudden dying, that's what it felt like. I mean, I went through the whole grieving process. Like I had dreams for many months, about them and stuff like that. And like my heart was broken, man, and just the grief. All these teachings that I had received for so long suddenly became magnified before me, and I really grew to doubt whether or not those teachings were wrong. I was in a great state of confusion about it. And so the agony was great enough such that, I would have rather, I think, gone without life, even if it meant eternal damnation, than live one more day in the torment I was in.
When Daniel first came home, he was so legalistic. And, because they're very harsh toward women. And women are supposed to be quiet and subservient, take the back seat, literally. When I got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore, I think at one point I said, gee, I'm so glad you're not the Holy Spirit, Daniel. Otherwise, I'd be a pile of dust, because his judgments were just so harsh. And that's part of the brotherhood mentality. That's what he lived under all that time. And it was hard for him to learn how to get that out of him and how to live normally and how to think normally.
Mr. Roberts, on with Prime Time.
Out of the public eye for 23 years, Jim Roberts surfaces again, strangely jumpy and nervous. We noticed his hair looked dyed, and he seemed to be carrying a computer case. We said we wanted to know about his group.
We know ways to believe that we're a cult.
Mm-hmm. What about your views on family? A lot of people feel like you are encouraging your members to cut their ties with their families.
Well, sometimes we do that because of what Christ taught.
And what is that, sir?
Well, maybe at a later time I could speak with you.
Okay. Well, would you? How could I reach you?
Pardon?
How could I reach you? Because
I'm the Texas bus.
We remembered what one of the parents had told us.
Like the vampires, I don't think Jim Roberts can stand the light of day, and he doesn't want to be in a position where he has to defend what he does.
And how does he answer the other scriptures? The one that says, honor thy father and mother. The one that says, return to the parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God.
And the parents say one thing you can do is tell your children about groups like this. Warn them to be on guard.